The marina will be built on this land at the western end of Newcastle Harbour. It could include moorings for around 150 craft, as well as an administration centre, a chandlery and perhaps a restaurant or tourist facility. The exact makeup is up to the developer and operator. Nearby will be a maintenance and repair centre. With few berths and no refuelling facilities, the Port of Newcastle has been largely bypassed by pleasure craft travelling the east coast. However, the Honeysuckle Development Corporation is hoping to change that, and with it the character of Newcastle Harbour.
This marina will present those opportunities to the craft, and also we believe that a great opportunity for those yachts that wish to go ocean racing. This is an excellent port that is very, very close to the ocean and very easily accessible.
And it's not only the harbour which is set to change. With the development will come a new look Wickham.
To become fairly cosmopolitan, it'll provide the community within walking distance good relaxing areas and a nice environment and a bit of a buzz, I think, for an area that's been fairly quiet for a number of years.
The Honeysuckle Development Corporation is confident of attracting some of Australia's premier marine operators. While the cost is yet to be determined, it's estimated it will be around $11 million. Once expressions of interest close at the end of January, a short list of tenderers will be selected. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
The only noise in Kersley this afternoon came from the click of a police camera, a stark contrast to the turbulent night before. An ambulance was called to Allendale Street just after 9:30 last night after reports of a stabbing. An 18-year-old man was treated at the scene before officers tried to take him to Cessnock Hospital. But it would be no ordinary trip. It's alleged Peter John Gerard from Kersley armed himself with an assault rifle and fired 2 shots into a house. Police say his father took the gun from him, but he got into this Ford Fairlane and chased the ambulance with the patient still inside. 2 police cars arrived on the scene and a pursuit developed. In the chase that followed, police allege his vehicle reached speeds of up to 130 kilometres an hour on wet streets, the Fairlane going on to the wrong side of the road and towards oncoming traffic. The Fairlane allegedly rammed 2 police cars and an ambulance. The car eventually hit a tree and police arrested the driver. This morning, 40-year-old Peter John Gerard appeared in Maitland Court charged with 17 offences in relation to the incident, including malicious wounding, 5 counts of malicious damage, discharge of a firearm into a building and possession of an assault rifle and a silencer. Gerard was formally refused bail and will appear in Cessnock Local Court on Monday. Richard O'Leary, NBN News. The halt of traffic on the New England Highway near Branxton signalled another life lost on our state's roads. The 40-year-old female driver of this Toyota Camry was killed instantly after a white twin cab crossed to the wrong side of the road just after 10 this morning.
It appears that the white dual cab has crossed to the incorrect side of the roadway and collided with the red vehicle, and as a result the driver of the red vehicle is deceased.
The Camry was spun around, crashing head-on into the Land Cruiser that had been following. The woman's 13-year-old son escaped with minor injuries, but was airlifted to the John Hunter Hospital along with the passenger of the twin cab. It's believed the 2 occupants of the twin cab were returning from an overnight shooting trip. Its 17-year-old driver was taken to Singleton Hospital and is in a satisfactory condition. The family of 6 from Dubbo in the Land Cruiser all escaped with minor injuries and were taken to Maitland Hospital. Richard O'Leary, NBN News. The 23-year-old man was the rear passenger in this Chrysler Galant when it collided head-on with a Ford Falcon at 9:30 last night. It's believed the driver of the Chrysler lost control on a bend of the Pacific Highway at Niagara Park near Gosford, the car veering onto the wrong side of the road before hitting the Falcon. The name of the dead Central Coast man has not been released. 3 other people were taken to Gosford Hospital with injuries. And less than 5 hours later, a lucky escape for a truck driver on the F3 at Arimba near Gosford. A heavy vehicle was towing a semi-trailer when the driver failed to negotiate a bend. The vehicles destroyed more than 120 metres of safety railing before stopping more than 30 metres off the road. The driver escaped with minor injuries. The red Camry, driven by 40-year-old Maria Ann Murray, received the brunt of the 3-car collision on the New England Highway. It was hit head-on by the white twin cab before being spun around into the path of a Land Cruiser that had been following. The mother was killed instantly, her 13-year-old son taken to John Hunter Hospital with minor injuries. 8 other people were also injured. The 17-year-old driver of the twin cab who received minor injuries has been charged with culpable driving, driving in a manner dangerous and negligent driving. He appeared in Singleton Court today and has been bailed to reappear on January 11 next year. And police have released the name of a 23-year-old man who was killed after a head-on collision on the Pacific Highway at Niagara Park near Gosford in the early hours of Saturday morning. Andrew Woodbury from Spencer on the Central Coast was a rear passenger in this Chrysler Galant when it collided with a Ford Falcon. Richard O'Leary, NBN News. Fire crews were called just before midnight, but the ancient wood burnt quickly and the blaze couldn't be contained. After more than an hour, the St James Anglican Church had been burnt out. Everything lost.
The vestments and the vessels and all the things inside, the piers and the equipment can never be replaced, you know.
The church has been the place of worship for the local Anglican community for more than 80 years, the site of countless baptisms, weddings and funerals.
We were planning to rebuild, but we didn't really expect anything like this to happen to the place. And but this building means a lot to a lot of people, and it's a very sad night.
Arson is suspected and investigations are continuing. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Game 1 in the series and Everett Stool made Brisbane look anything but the ABL's premier side. The Bandits had more air swings than a novice golfer on a Sunday afternoon.
It was one of those things. Everything worked well and I was happy.
And who wouldn't be? A new ABL record of 15 strikeouts, only giving up 1 hit and a walk. But as Rod Marsh will tell you, behind every great performance, there is generally another major contributor. Enter catcher Bob Henley. He was the one calling the shots behind the plate, directing Stool, a fact the record breaker didn't overlook.
He did the work. I sat back, I trusted him, did what he called, and everything worked out.
I'm not going to take credit for much at all. I mean, the guy out there, that speaks for itself, the performance. I'm not going out there and I'm not striking out 15 guys a game. That's from his arm, that's not from me. I'll throw what I think might be appropriate for the situation, but when it comes down to it, it's his pitch and it's his game. So all the credit goes to him.
The Eagles now have an 11-17 record for the season and have climbed another place on the ABL ladder to be 7th. Paul Gregg, NBN News. The clean 1 to 1.5 metre waves provided good conditions for the 450 competitors from 90 clubs gathered for the championship. Newcastle won the overall and handicap point score, with 5 members from the team selected in the stateside to compete in the Nationals in Queensland next month. One of the better performances in the carnival came from the Central Coast Daniel Shade, who won the 12 surf race, board and Ironman, while Wombrel's Kai Hurst took out the 14's Ironman. Meantime, Newcastle athlete Bruce Gulliver, running closest to the camera, finished second in the Canberra Gift over the weekend. It was some consolation for the 31-year-old backmarker, who was to compete in the ill-fated Daewoo Indoor Series on Saturday night. And finally, local NASCAR driver John Woodland and his team have finished 13th in round 3 of the Australian Stock Car Championship. The race featured a USA Australia Challenge at the Calder Park Thunderdome, which attracted a crowd of 65,000.
Foster youngster Brock Flowers started canoeing and kayaking 5 years ago. His experience in the water helping him to win 7 gold medals at the recent state all-school championships. Under the careful eye of his father, Brock is now preparing for the Australian Championships, where he will compete in slalom and whitewater events. A Year 11 student at Foster High, Brock juggles his training with his schoolwork.
I train mainly in the mornings because that leaves me time in the afternoons to study and everything, because I'm in Year 11, so it's pretty important to me. Mainly, but in the afternoons I do go down to the gym and do practice sessions in the surf and that sort of thing. But I mainly do my flat water work in the morning down here at the lake.
Brock hopes to be picked in the junior national sides chosen at the championships.
There's 2 junior teams getting selected. One will go to New Zealand and the other one will go to Europe for the pre-junior world titles halfway through the year.
Multi-million-dollar drug busts like this one at Hervey Bay in Queensland are the result of months of work by Customs, Australia's last line of defence against drug smugglers. Today, Lake Macquarie was the target. It's not the first visit by a Customs boat, but it's the only one that has tried to attract attention. The usual covert operation replaced because Customs admits it needs community help.
We've come to seek the support of the local population in relation to narcotic importation or any other prohibitive imports coming into the marine environment in this area.
Although Customs denies there's a major importation problem in the area, it says Newcastle and Lake Macquarie are seen as ideal rendezvous for drug smugglers.
So if you can fly it from somewhere else or you can bring it from somewhere else by vessel into an area like this, the main road's just over there and it's a couple of hours to Sydney and you're right in the middle of things.
Customs will continue to patrol local waters for the next few days. The next visit promises to be a lot quieter affair. Richard O'Leary, NBN News. It's that time of the year again for our postal workers. They'll be at it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week until Christmas Eve. They'll find a slot for tens of thousands of cards and letters. Millions more will go through a mechanised sorting machine.
Oh, this is the crazy time of year as far as the post office is concerned.
It's even more hectic than usual this year, with a record number of Christmas tidings sent through the post. But extra special care is still taken to ensure those Christmas lists get to the North Pole and back, with everyone personally answered by Santa. It's Christmas Eve, all the mail's been sent out. What do you guys do?
We sit down and let a collective gasp go from us, because we've done it for another year, and it's nice then to enjoy it with our families and just take a little bit of a rest.
But they won't have much time to relax, as the new year is nearly as busy for Australia Post, with credit card bills coming back to haunt Christmas shoppers. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Over the past 8 years, the channel south of the Forster-Tuncurry Bridge has been gradually getting narrower. A lack of rain has meant water has not been able to flush through the lake effectively. The sand has built up in the Breckenridge Channel to the extent that larger commercial boats are restricted to moving at high tide.
The channel has silted up over the years and will continue to do so, and this is really maintenance dredging. It'll be required again in some time in the future.
The Great Lakes Council has called on local developers to help make the 3-kilometre long channel navigable for the Little Street businesses and recreational boats. Director of Engineering Services Frank Rochford says several expressions of interest are being evaluated. It could be months before dredging begins. Mr Rochford says it would be an impossible task to have the sand removed in time for the busy boating activity at Christmas.
It's up to the developer to decide what section he will dredge, and that will depend on his need and the location of his deposit site for the sand, all of which he has to find.
Council is hoping to dredge the sand under the Forster-Tuncurry Bridge when money becomes available. Tracy Walsh, NBN News.
Welcome to Mayfield, the suburb with the most polluted skies in the state. It's the finding of an Australian nuclear science study that says Mayfield has the highest reading of fine particles in its air. That spells disaster for the health of residents, but the EPA says the study only tested a handful of suburbs across the state. It claims the level of air pollution is lower than it's been for decades.
The rate of improvement has tapered off a bit as we've gotten to deal with the easy ones. We now have to deal with some of the harder issues.
The industry that forms the heart of Mayfield is responsible for more than 3/5 of fine particles during summer. But it's not the smokestacks that dominate the suburb skyline that are causing most of the problems, it's the build-up of industrial dust on the ground. The EPA says it's working to further reduce air pollution levels and rejects criticism that it's a toothless tiger.
We prosecuted BHP successfully early this year for a couple of offences, and we've also issued infringement notices for other companies that have had minor infringements.
Industry isn't solely to blame. Vehicle emissions cause more than 2/3 of air pollution in winter. The EPA says it's trying to introduce a compulsory exhaust emission test for vehicles before they're given a pink slip. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Following last Thursday night's meeting at Hexham Bowling Club, 3 committee members of the Hunter and District Greyhound Association were nominated to hold discussions with 2 members of the Greyhound Control Board in Sydney last night. 2 proposals came from the 3-hour meeting and were put to the Newcastle Jockey Club this morning. Both were rejected, as the prize money was over the $6,600 the club is prepared to outlay for each meeting for a 3-month trial period. The Control Board, which has been asked by the Minister for Sport to seek a resolution, has now called off a meeting on Sunday to resolve the dispute. It will discuss the matter further at a full meeting of the Control Board next Tuesday. The only problem is that Beaumont Park's controlling body, the Newcastle Jockey Club, meets next Monday to decide its future. The board could decide to sell, making any further discussions about Beaumont Park as a greyhound venue irrelevant.
It's arguably the most important document in the history of Australia's coal industry, which generates $7 billion a year. Minister for Resources David Beddall delivered the verdict of the 7-month inquiry by Ray Taylor.
It is no doubt that this industry can double in size in the next 10 years.
But that's if radical reforms are established in the workplace, including more enterprise bargaining and the end of closed shop hiring practices in the industry. Both unions and employers agree the culture of us versus them has to be broken, but are divided on the report's methods.
Presents the industry with a wonderful opportunity to go forward.
We're somewhat disappointed that it hasn't gone far enough.
The union lost its bid for a watchdog to be established within the Department of Resources to oversee coal prices, but the union says it won't back down if it thinks Australia's biggest export is being sold too cheaply.
We've already said that we won't guarantee supply until we've seen what the outcome of the market negotiations are. And I think if that's not a very clear message to both the producers and the customers, then nothing is.
The Australian Coal Industry Council, which includes the state and federal governments, coal producers and unions, will meet this Sunday to try and reach a consensus on how to implement the recommendations of the report. But any changes may come too late for more than 60 mine workers at the Liddell Colliery in the Hunter Valley, with speculation the mine will close. The company says it'll release a statement later this week. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Albie Bergen is one of the grand old men of the sea. At 79, he's about to embark on his 30th Sydney to Hobart race, this time aboard the yacht Alstar.
It just seems to grip you and you just have to keep going back.
Albie's return to the race after an 8-year break coincides with the event's 50th anniversary. It's a gruelling event considered to be one of the hardest in the world. The record fleet of almost 400 yachts will set sail from 3 start lines.
My motto is, prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Today, the voice of experience gave some advice to one of the sea's newest recruits. 20-year-old Danielle Cox won a competition which will see her join the crew of Walk on the Wild Side for her first Sydney to Hobart.
It's going to be wet, cold and miserable.
And then why are you doing it?
Because that sounds like fun.
The race starts on Boxing Day. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Last month, the Abermain teenager was the driver of a stolen car, which caused a $26,000 police vehicle to crash and catch fire. The two officers narrowly escaped injury. Although police asked that he be kept in custody, he was granted bail in Cessnock Local Court. 6 days later, the teenager and a 16-year-old companion from Weston robbed the Abermain post office, threatening the female attendant with a knife. All up, he was charged with 9 offences, including robbing a house the same week. At the time, the 15-year-old was on probation for 2 serious assaults committed earlier in the year. 2 days ago, Magistrate Alan Railton sentenced the teenager to 9 months detention. In handing down his sentence on the 15-year-old, Magistrate Railton took into account 8 other traffic convictions. However, the youth was fined just 50 cents for driving unlicensed, uninsured and unregistered. The sentence has outraged many in the Cessnock community who say it's far too lenient and that it's just one example of a series of light sentences being handed out to teenagers in the area. Ken Victor of the Community Aid Panel works closely with police and young offenders. He, like many others, believes the sentences are a joke.
Some of these crimes are virtually adult crimes, but they're not being treated as such.
Police have applied to have the 16-year-old sentence reviewed. Jodie McKay, NBN News. The Vintage Country Club is planned for this land off McDonald's Road at Rothbury. The $700 million development was first proposed in 1988 when it gained council approval and work on an 18-hole golf course was started. However, in 1990 the owner stopped construction when he failed to get foreign financial backing. Since then, the site has lain idle. However, a Perth-based company, Hunter Valley Estates, is seeking to change that. While the development it's proposing is smaller, it's still very significant. Over the next 8 years, the developer wants to complete the golf course, build a clubhouse and resort, a hotel facility, and sell 631 residential lots.
I believe it will be good for the area. Clearly, it will need to be balanced because it is on the fringe of the vineyard area and viticulture has its own special demands, and we've got to make sure that it doesn't impact on the viticulture industry as such.
Council is expecting protests from local vignerons. However, General Manager Colin Cowan believes their concerns can be alleviated. A development application is expected to be lodged early next year. If that's successful, work should start soon after. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
For between 50 and 60 cents a week, Maitland and Cessnock ratepayers who already have curbside garbage collection will have a greener option to throwing their rubbish away. The councils have approved a detailed joint recycling proposal for divided wheelie bins like this one to be collected weekly.
We're introducing a very convenient, very user-friendly type system, which it can include a lot more materials. We're actually, the ratepayer is paying for the service rather than trying to make money on the service.
The recycling service will extend the life of local landfill tips. The councils are now calling for tenders. Only 6 contractors now operating in Australia have the capacity to provide the level of service needed. Both councils are confident the service won't suffer the fate of other recycling programs like Newcastle's, which fail because of low participation rates or because of low profits for the contractor.
We're probably looking mainly at the big multinational waste disposal firms who've got the capital and facilities to offer this type of service. We're also looking at a contract anywhere between 5 and 10 years.
Understandably, Paul Harrigan has mixed emotions about the Kangaroo Tour. He was part of the first Test team which lost their opening encounter for the Ashes at Wembley and through injury was denied a chance to help retain them in the remaining 2 Tests.
I watched a lot of games and, the only thing I could probably count on there during that times was to try and get back and play in that last Test at France, which I was lucky enough to do, so I was kind of happy, but I watched a real lot of football and it was fairly hard.
The Chief regained his place in the Test squad against France, but despite the disappointment of not playing in the deciding match against Great Britain, believes that game was the highlight of a memorable tour for Mal Meninga's Kangaroos.
I think it'd have to be the 3rd Test, and winning, and even though I wasn't involved in it, and it's very hard, but just winning the Ashes, it was very hard. They are catching up a little bit, and it's always good to beat the Pommies.
Harrigan is still struggling with a couple of niggling injuries, which he is confident he will overcome early in the new year.
Basically, I've been training all year, and the 3 or 4 weeks we had off waiting to go this side around the semi-final time, I was training very hard, so I'm looking forward to another month or maybe even 6 weeks, and I'll get back into it. But I'm fairly excited about next year. Everything seems to be new and going fairly well, so it should be good.
This could have been the scene of another air disaster, but amazingly the pilot and passenger walked away uninjured. The plane took off at about 3 o'clock this afternoon for a joy flight along the coast. Shortly after, the engine cut out and the pilot headed for the nearest paddock. The pilot picked this field 1 kilometre east of Williamtown Air Base.
Unfortunately, as we approached the end of this paddock at about walking pace, we broke through the fence here and hit the ditch on the other side. The nose wheel snapped off, and there was just enough momentum to carry the aircraft over onto its back.
The 42-year-old RAF pilot Roger McKay and his 45-year-old passenger John Cunningham, also a pilot, walked away from the wreckage with barely a scratch. The 1950s Trojan wasn't as lucky, with structural damage to most of the plane.
I was very disappointed. They're a valuable warbird, and I honestly thought we'd walk away from this one, having landed in a really good paddock and stopped, as I said before, almost a walking pace.
Despite the close call, the pilot says he'll have no qualms about flying again.
I've been flying a long time. These things happen.
The Bureau of Air Safety is investigating.
Former national junior champion David McKellar gathered some friends to test the strength of the local contingent on the water. In last year's Australian VJ Sailing Championships held in Sydney, he had a disappointing run, coming 7th out of 13. He's hoping a different boat with a fiberglass hull will take him to the winner's spot in the senior heats next week. 37 juniors and 13 seniors from all over Australia have entered at this stage.
Very spectacular if the winds are good, and it should be wonderful for us and for Taree.
Sailing Committee member Laurie Douglas says the local sailors stand a good chance against the strong senior talent of the Belmont Sailing Club.
Some have purchased new sails and some are purchasing new gear and just tuning them up, and they should go pretty well because we're in home territory here, and which puts us in an advantage.
The first race begins next Tuesday. Tracy Walsh, NBN News.